What if your reflection wasn't yours? Not a trick of the light. Not a warped pane of glass. Something else, something watching. Now, listen carefully. There is a story buried beneath centuries of dust, a myth so ancient and so unsettling that it was never meant to be spoken aloud. It wasn't simply erased. It was corrupted, twisted, rewritten, its truth too dangerous to survive untouched. This is the myth of a god who was neither one nor the other. A figure so perfect, so untouchable, that even desire itself shattered against their form. A boy born of Hermes and Aphrodite, sculpted from divinity, carrying the beauty of two worlds. And a nymph, Salmacis, who refused to be denied, who whispered a prayer that reshaped reality itself. They met once. And from that moment, nothing remained whole. You think you know the story? You don't. What the poets told you, what Ovid locked in his verses, was a lie of omission. They left out the whispers that followed. The tremors beneath the earth. The reason men feared to touch the water of that cursed spring, why they claimed it stole their strength, hollowed them out, changed them. Because the change was real. Because something happened in that water that should never have been possible. Because Hermaphroditus did not simply merge with Salmacis, they became something else entirely. A body neither male nor female, a form that defied the gods themselves. A presence that unsettled Olympus, that blurred the sacred lines between creation and destruction. What was born that day wasn't just a being. It was a warning. And the echoes of that transformation never faded. Look closer at the statues in forgotten temples, the ones that don't fit neatly into categories, the ones sculptors claimed were mistakes. Read the texts that scholars dismissed as embellishments, as metaphor, as too strange to be taken literally. Listen to the stories that whisper of those who gazed into still waters and saw something staring back, something that wasn't supposed to be there. There's a reason history recoils from this myth. There's a reason mirrors sometimes feel like they're waiting. And there's a reason you're still reading this. Some myths are dead. This one is alive. The fire flickers, spitting embers into the blackness, shadows stretching like skeletal fingers across stone walls. A figure leans forward, eyes hollow with something between terror and reverence. The story must be spoken. It has weight, an ache in the bones of the world. The moment the words leave their lips, something shifts. The air tightens. The past is no longer past, it is happening. Listen. There was a time before silence, before stories had form, before words carried the power to shape the very fabric of existence. But even then, before language, before ink, before parchment, there was the myth. It slithered through the breath of the first man who feared the dark. It called in the minds of those who looked to the heavens and saw not emptiness, but watching. The stars were not cold, dead light. They were eyes. The wind was not a whisper. It was a voice. Something was out there. And so the first story was born, not written, not spoken, but felt. A pulse beneath the skin. A dread that slithered up the spine. The myth was not a lie, not a fabrication, but an answer. A desperate attempt to grasp the ungraspable. To name the thing in the dark before it could take form and consume. And once the first story was spoken, it could not be undone. The gods rose from the breath of dying men. They took shape in the blood spilled on battlefields, in the weeping of mothers, in the roar of storms that split the sky like an open wound. Their names were spoken, chanted, cursed, worshipped. They grew monstrous and beautiful, cruel and kind. They wove themselves into every thread of existence. But myths were never meant to be gentle. They are hungry. They demand sacrifice. A trade, belief for survival, devotion for mercy. Civilizations carved their myths into stone, prayed them into the soil, built temples to hold their weight. They feared what would happen if they were forgotten. Because a forgotten story does not die. It festers. It waits. And when the world shifts, when empires crumble, when gods are abandoned, the myths remain. Their bones buried beneath ruins, their whispers hidden in crumbling texts, their eyes peering from the cracks in history. They adapt. They change their names, shed their skins, slip unnoticed into new tongues, new beliefs. The story of Hermaphroditus and Salmacis was never just a tale. It was a warning. A curse. A transformation that defied the gods themselves. A myth so dangerous, so unacceptable, that it was twisted, reshaped, whispered about in half-truths and contradictions. A myth that refused to die. And if you think myths are just stories, harmless echoes of an ancient world, then you have not been listening. Because the myths have never stopped speaking. They are speaking now. The air is heavy, charged with something unseen. The wind does not howl, does not stir the leaves or ripple the waters. It waits. Holds its breath. The gods are watching. On the threshold of night and day, in the space where time folds into itself, two forces collide. One is swift, mercurial, a phantom of the crossroads, the whisper behind every lie and every truth. The other is love incarnate, raw and untamed, beauty so perfect it wounds, so intoxicating it corrupts. Hermes and Aphrodite. The messenger and the goddess. The trickster and the temptress. The meeting is inevitable, written into the bones of the cosmos before the first dawn ever spilled its light over the earth. No hymns are sung for what happens next. No poets dare to linger too long on the moment. But the myths have ways of speaking through the cracks, through the spaces where the words refuse to go. A union that should never have been. A child neither meant nor expected. Hermaphroditus is not born in fire, not torn screaming into the world in the blooded agony of childbirth. No. This birth is something else entirely. It is the slow exhale of the universe shifting, the ripple that moves outward when something impossible takes form. It is the first breath of an existence that does not fit within the fragile lines mortals have drawn around gender, around beauty, around power. The child's body is luminous, the perfect blending of his parents' divinity. He walks in the golden footprints of his mother, leaves no trace upon the earth like his father. Too perfect. Too whole. The gods, who have shaped the world through opposites, male and female, love and war, order and chaos, watch this being with something close to unease. A mistake? A prophecy? A disruption? There are whispers. Some claim it was not a birth, but a merging, a consequence of forces too powerful colliding in a single form. Others insist it was an act of defiance, an affront to the natural order, a being created not by love, but by arrogance. The stories contradict. They always do. Some say Aphrodite wept to see her child so strange, so unknowable, that she turned her gaze away. Others say she smiled, understanding the power in such a creation. That love, in its purest form, does not divide but consumes, leaving nothing untouched, unclaimed. And Hermes? Some say he laughed, delighted by the trick played on fate itself. Others say he looked upon his child and saw, for the first time, something even he could not outrun. The myths do not agree. But one thing remains certain, Hermaphroditus was never meant to be ordinary. The gods knew it. And so did the world. The water does not move. It waits. A pool, still as glass, untouched by wind or time. The surface glows, golden light rippling beneath as if the sun itself is trapped below. It should be beautiful. It should be safe. But something about it lingers too long in the mind. Something about it watches back. She is here. Salmacis. Not the storming, raging kind of nymph who commands the waves. Not the vengeful mistress of tempests, nor the goddess who drags sailors into the abyss. She does not chase. She does not fight. She waits. She wants. And that is worse. The myths have always feared women who do not beg, who do not seduce with softness, but with something far more insidious, persistence. A hunger that does not burn out. A desire that does not bend. Salmacis is not like the others of her kind. She does not dance among the reeds, does not sing for the gods, does not lose herself in laughter beneath the moon. She watches. She listens. She waits for the moment you step too close. She is the anomaly among the water spirits, the wrong note in a song played for centuries. Naiads are meant to be fluid, transient, carried by the current of fate, of men, of power beyond their grasp. But Salmacis, she grips. She clings. And gods help the one who wades into her waters. They say she was harmless once, that she tended to her spring as all naiads do, basking in the glow of the world, untouched by human hands. But something changed. A desire awakened, something too large, too impossible, too forbidden. She did not want to be loved. She wanted to consume. So when he came, golden-haired, the child of gods, too beautiful for this world, Salmacis did not sigh in longing. She did not call sweetly from the reeds, did not let the fates dictate her role. No. She took. She prayed, and the water answered. She wrapped herself around him, her body, her voice, her very existence merging with his until there was no boundary between them. She did not seduce him. She rewrote him. Forced her will into the fabric of his being until there was no Hermaphroditus and no Salmacis, only a single entity, bound together by a wish that should never have been granted. And the gods did nothing. Because Salmacis was not the first to ask for too much. She was not the first to defy the rules of desire, of separation, of self. But she was the first to succeed. The water still waits. Step in, and you will feel it, the lingering presence of a nymph who did not vanish, who did not die. Her myth was meant to be a warning. But warnings are useless when the trap has already been set. The pages whisper. A hush spreads across time, ink bleeding through the centuries, staining history with a story no one can scrub clean. The words have survived, carved into the bones of language itself, waiting for eyes foolish enough to read them aloud. Ovid's Metamorphoses. The book of changes. The book of gods and men, of punishments and miracles, of bodies twisted, reformed, broken, remade. There is no mercy in these verses, no softness in the fate of those who stray too close to the divine. The text pulses with something ancient, something unstoppable. Once read, it cannot be unread. And buried within its labyrinth of myths, like a vein of poisoned gold, lies the tale of Hermaphroditus and Salmacis. It begins as all tragedies do, with beauty, with innocence, with something too pure for the world that holds it. Hermaphroditus, son of Hermes and Aphrodite, golden as the dawn, untouched by want, untethered by love. A youth who is whole, a body that belongs to no one, a spirit still unshaped by hunger. The gods have kissed him into existence, and in his perfect balance, he is untouchable. But myths do not allow perfection to last. And then Ivha. Salmacis. The water nymph. The waiting mouth of the story, the silent predator that does not chase, but lets the prey come to her. She sees him, and she does not let him go. Ovid's lines coil like a strangling vine, his words suffocating, winding around the reader's throat. She does not ask. She claims. Her hands on his skin, her voice in his ear, her body pressing, pleading, refusing to yield. But he resists. Of course he does. This is not love. This is something other, something thick and inescapable. Desire sharpened to a blade. A want that does not bend, that does not crumble at rejection. And so she begs the gods. She prays. Not for him to love her. Not for him to want her. No, she asks for the impossible. That they may never be apart. That their bodies may never be separate again. And the gods listen. Ovid's words ignite. The transformation is not gentle. It is not poetic. Flesh liquefies, bones grind into new shapes, the self is shattered and remade in an instant of agony. Hermaphroditus disappears, or rather, he is consumed. The body that was his alone now belongs to another. No longer man, no longer woman, no longer singular. Something new. Something forbidden. And then, silence. Other myths would end in triumph. Others would grant vengeance, restoration, catharsis. But Ovid gives none. Hermaphroditus, raw and unrecognizable, turns to the heavens and curses the water. Not just for himself, but for all who enter it. The pool that took him will take others. A fate sealed in ink. The myth is written, bound, preserved. It should have faded into dust, should have slipped into the cracks of forgotten stories. But it has not. It refuses. Because transformation never ends. It only waits for the next body to claim. The land trembles. A place forgotten by time but not by the gods. Somewhere between the cliffs that slice the sky and the shadows where the sea breathes its last, Caria is born of harsh stone and wild, bitter winds. The earth does not forgive here. It does not yield. It waits. You can feel it the moment you step onto the soil, the weight of centuries pressing down on your chest, the sting of ancient stories seeping into your bones. This is no land for mercy. No place for softness. The mountains watch, cold and unblinking. The coastline stretches like the arm of a lover long abandoned, pulling you closer, but offering no warmth, no comfort. Here, the gods carved their names into the land with the sharp edge of fury. The jagged rocks that line the shores are not the work of erosion, but the marks of a battle that will never be forgotten. This is a place that was meant to break the heart. A land where the very air is heavy with whispers, the wind nothing more than the breath of forgotten souls. There is nothing gentle about Caria. The land itself feels cursed, as though it has been molded by the gods with a force too violent to comprehend. The sea, an infinite stretch of turmoil, pushes against the land, indifferent to the lives that dare to seek its edge. The mountains rise high, impossibly steep, like sentinels that never rest, casting long, dark shadows over the earth. This is where the myth began. This harsh, unforgiving land, where the call of nature is raw, violent, and impossible to ignore. The myth of Salmacis and Hermaphroditus does not unfold in the fertile, green plains of comfort. It takes root here, where there is only rock and water and gods who have no patience for the weak. Caria was not meant for the faint-hearted. It is a place where the gods made their decrees with cold calculation. They did not offer blessings but trials. Here, in the lonely places, something stirs. It always has. It always will. And it waits. The people who live in this land are born with the same fire in their veins. Strong, proud, unwilling to bend to the weight of the world. But even their strength cannot break the curse of Caria. Their homes, sitting like jagged teeth along the cliffs, are built with the same resilience, the same defiance. But the sea, the mountains, the gods, they will always win. They will always take what they want. In the heart of the myth, the water is no longer just water. It is a force. A thing that does not flow gently through the land, but rages. It crashes against the edges of the world, wearing down the rocks, wearing down the spirit. And Salmacis, she is no different. The land gives birth to no softness. And in the dark pools of the springs, Salmacis lurks. She waits beneath the surface, beneath the skin of the earth itself. Her waters are not pure. They are filled with something else, something older than time. Her home is a reflection of the land, wild, untamed, indifferent to the desires of men or gods. The myth does not begin with love. It begins with something far more dangerous, need. A longing that cannot be denied. It is not enough to exist here. One must consume, must take, or be taken. The landscape does not offer sanctuary. It offers only the promise of a struggle. Of something waiting to consume you if you dare come too close. In the distance, you can hear the crash of the waves against the cliffs. The eternal rhythm of the sea. And in the silence between those crashes, the story whispers. It always whispers. The air is thick with silence. The kind that swallows sound, that presses against the lungs, that makes the skin crawl with something unspoken. A place where time does not pass in moments, but lingers, waiting. The water stirs, but there is no wind. The surface does not ripple from breath or movement. It simply exists, watching, listening. They say the gods live here. Not in the sky. Not in the temples built by trembling hands. But here, beneath the surface, beneath the weight of water so still, so black, it swallows the sun whole. This is not a spring. It is not a river, not a lake, not a pool meant to soothe weary bones. It is a mouth. A throat. A thing that has devoured for centuries and is never, never full. You were warned not to come. The old ones knew better. They knew the price of stepping too close, of letting the water touch bare skin. A promise that could not be undone, a bond that would twist itself around the soul and pull, and pull, and pull. No priest speaks of this place. No offering is enough. No prayer reaches the thing beneath. This is not the water of life. It is something else. It has always been like this. The ancients knew that water was not a passive thing. It was a god in its own right. 1,000 gods, 1,000,000, slipping through the world unnoticed, binding themselves to the land, to the air, to the hearts of those foolish enough to believe they could drink without consequence. They called them names, built shrines, whispered to the rivers before crossing. The naiads watched. The nymphs listened. And the water, it remembered. Springs bled from the bones of the earth, and men bowed before them, afraid and awed in equal measure. They swore oaths upon the banks, for no lie could be spoken in the presence of flowing water. They threw silver into the depths, begging for favor. They let the currents pull their dead away, believing the river would carry them to a place beyond pain, beyond grief. The gods of water were not just deities. They were verdicts. They were judgment and fate and finality. And among them, some were feared more than others. Salmacis. A name that lingers like an unfinished thought, curling around the edges of myth, never fully spoken, never fully understood. A nymph, they said. A water spirit. A thing that did not belong to the world of men, but wanted to. Not content to watch from the depths. Not satisfied with the whispers of lost voices in the current. She wanted more. And so she took. The spring that bore her name was no longer just a body of water. It was her. It pulsed with something restless, something hungry, something that did not ask. To bathe in her waters was to change. To lose the lines that separated flesh from spirit, identity from oblivion. To become something else. This was the power of sacred springs. They were never just water. They were thresholds. They were choices made without understanding, promises that could never be undone. You did not simply drink. You offered yourself. And the gods, they did not forget. They did not forgive. And neither did the water. The fire crackles, spitting embers into the abyss of night. The old man leans forward, his voice low, his shadow flickering against the stone wall. No one dares to interrupt. The weight of his words hangs thick in the air, pressing against the skin, sinking into the marrow. He speaks of something older than the gods men now kneel before, something whispered before Olympus had its throne, before names had been carved into marble, before men had dared to claim understanding of what was never meant to be understood. Before there was one, there were two. And before there were two, there was one. A being neither man nor woman, neither light nor shadow, neither bound by flesh nor confined by form. They did not walk, they moved. They did not speak, they resonated. A pulse, a force, a truth so terrifying in its completeness that it had to be torn apart, split down the center, fragmented so that the world could bear its presence without crumbling under the weight of its existence. And yet, the wound never healed. The echoes of that severance seeped into the bones of myth, into the spaces between stories, into the places where words falter and silence takes over. The ancients knew. They saw it in the shifting tide, in the wind that never chose a single direction, in the way fire both created and consumed, in the moment before waking when the mind is neither dreaming nor awake, but trapped in the in-between. They felt it in themselves, the pieces that did not fit, the longing for something they could not name, the hunger for a wholeness they had never known, but could not forget. And so they shaped their gods accordingly. In the forgotten temples of civilizations long buried, there were statues with no fixed form, faces that shifted depending on the light, bodies that refused to be contained within the limits of either definition or denial. The Sumerian spoke of Inanna, who descended into the underworld stripped of all that marked her. The Akkadians whispered of Ishtar, whose lovers feared the transformation she bestowed upon them. the Egyptians carved the name of Hapi into stone, the god of the flood, of abundance, of fertility, neither man nor woman, but both, always both. These were not mistakes. These were not aberrations. These were remnants. The Greeks were not the first to tell the story of Hermaphroditus. They were merely the latest to shape the myth, to take what had always been and force it into something they could name, something they could fear, something they could turn into a cautionary tale instead of a shattered reflection of the truth. They gave the being a parentage, a moment of transformation, a body that had once been one thing and was now something other. They did not see what came before, the gods that did not change, because they had never been divided to begin with. But the old ones knew. The fire is dying. The old man's voice fades into the darkness. No one speaks. No one moves. Somewhere, unseen, something watches. And it remembers. The sky split open with the first cry of the child. A wail, high and unbroken, carved through the stillness, rippling across the heavens like a blade through silk. The stars flinched. The air itself trembled. Even the gods, those untouchable weavers of fate, turned their heads toward the sound, for it was not the cry of something ordinary. It was not the cry of something simple. The child was born beneath twin shadows, the quicksilver glint of Hermes, the god of thresholds and trickery, and the smoldering glow of Aphrodite, the goddess of unrelenting desire. A paradox made flesh. Beauty and cunning, swiftness and allure, a heartbeat caught between two opposing forces, both celestial and inescapable. The fates, silent and watchful, wove the first threads of the child's destiny with hesitant hands. They knew. This was no ordinary son. No ordinary daughter. This was something else. As he grew, the world around him bent to his presence. There were no edges to him, no sharp distinctions, only a seamless merging of what should have been separate. The radiance of his mother was in him, his skin, golden as the first light of dawn, his lips full as the promise of a whispered secret, his eyes drowning in something unspoken. Yet the cleverness of his father lingered beneath the surface, a quickness in his movements, a sly amusement curling in the corners of his mouth, an untouchable air that made him seem just beyond reach, no matter how close one came. Men and women alike faltered when they looked at him. Their breath hitched, their mind stilled, their words turned to dust on their tongues. He was beauty itself, but beauty without definition, beauty that unsettled as much as it entranced. A beauty that made the gods uneasy. He did not belong to Olympus, not truly. The halls of the immortals were built on order, on the clarity of distinction, gods and mortals, men and women, power and submission. But he was none of those things. He was both, and neither. A thing that could not be caged, a thing that did not fit. And so, the world became his home. He walked through forests where the trees bent in hushed reverence. He stood on the edge of rivers that whispered his name in gurgling voices, longing to pull him into their embrace. The wind coiled around his body like a lover, desperate to claim even a sliver of his essence. The animals did not fear him, nor did they worship him, they merely accepted, as if he had always been part of something older than gods, older than men, older than the concept of division itself. And yet, he was alone. Not for lack of suitors. Not for lack of admirers. But because no one truly knew what to make of him. To call him a man felt incomplete. To call him a woman felt just as empty. To claim he was both did not satisfy, for it was more than that, it was not simply a meeting of two halves, but the existence of something whole, something untouched by the blade that had severed all others into their separate forms. And so they feared him. Worshipped him. Desired him. But never understood him. Still, he walked, ever restless, seeking something he could not name. Perhaps it was his own reflection, though when he gazed into the still waters of sacred springs, he did not see himself, he saw something shifting, something inconstant, something that did not belong to the laws of flesh or fate. The gods watched. They whispered among themselves. And the fates, ever weaving, hesitated, the threads in their hands trembling like plucked strings. For they had seen what was to come. And they knew. The story was only beginning. The air clung to her skin, thick with the scent of damp earth and water, so still it might have been holding its breath. Shadows flickered in the reeds, restless, shifting, like silent witnesses waiting for something to break the silence. A ripple. A footstep. A heartbeat out of place. Salmacis was there, watching. She was not like the others. The nymphs of Artemis were winds that refused to be caught, vanishing into the wilds, untouched and untouchable. Others danced in Dionysian frenzy, drowning in laughter and madness, leaving the taste of crushed fruit and sweat on the tongues of those who dared to chase them. But Salmacis, she did not run. She did not vanish. She stayed. Desire was not a passing breeze to her. It was a tide, slow and inescapable, pulling, consuming, inevitable. She had watched him for days. The youth with golden skin, with a face that did not belong to one world or another, with lips soft as whispered prayers and eyes that saw everything but never lingered. He was unclaimed, unbound. And yet, there was distance in him, something untouched, something that made her stomach twist with a hunger she could not name. She wanted. Not in the way men wanted, not in the way gods took what pleased them without question. No, hers was a wanting that burned beneath the skin, that settled in the bones like an ache that would never fade. It was not fleeting. It was not passive. It was hunger sharpened into need, a thirst that would never be sated by the coolness of her own waters. So, she waited. The sky, pale and indifferent, bore no witness. The trees whispered among themselves but did not warn him. And when he came, stepping through the tall grass, unaware, unafraid, she felt it swell within her, raw and wild. She did not call out at first. She let the moment stretch, let it coil around her like the tightening of a noose. She watched the way his muscles tense beneath golden skin, the effortless grace in his every movement, the way his fingers trailed absently through the water's surface, unaware of the way the ripples carried her name in their silent language. Salmacis. And then, she moved. The stillness shattered. She stepped forward, bare feet pressing into the damp soil, her breath shallow, her pulse hammering against the fragile cage of her ribs. He turned, startled, but there was no fear in his eyes, only the mild curiosity of something that had never known what it meant to be prey. His mistake. She spoke, voice low, winding through the air like the slow curl of incense, thick, cloying, unavoidable. A welcome. A plea. A lure hidden behind words that meant nothing, yet carried the weight of everything she felt. He answered. Words. Polite. Distant. He was not unkind, but neither did he step toward her. That was the moment she knew. He would never come willingly. And so, she did what the wild things do. She took. She begged, she pleaded, but when he resisted, she did not yield. She did not soften. She did not disappear like morning mist when the sun rose. She was the water, and water does not ask permission before it swallows. He fought. Oh, how he fought! But her limbs were vines, her body an unrelenting tide, and she wrapped herself around him with the desperation of something starving, something drowning, something that would rather break than be denied. The gods listened. The water itself, thick with whispers, curled around them, watching, waiting, deciding. And then, the shift. A cry. Not his. Not hers. Something older, something deeper, something that shook the very fabric of what was meant to be separate. Skin against skin. Breath against breath. The agony of something neither one had wanted. The ecstasy of something irreversible. The ripple spread. And the gods, who had seen all things, who had laughed at the cruelty of men, who had written fates in stone, paused. For this was not love. Not desire fulfilled. Not a victory. This was something else entirely. This was the birth of something that had never been before. The water was too still. Not the tranquil kind, not the hush of peace that comes with dawn's first breath, but the silence before something breaks. Before the knife slips through skin. Before the gods decide a fate they never meant to change. The trees knew. They swayed without wind, whispering warnings no one would hear. The reed swayed, restless, uneasy, shifting in the presence of something unseen. The earth itself seemed to recoil, as if it could sense the weight of what had not yet happened but was already written. And then, footsteps. Soft, measured, the kind that belonged to someone who had never needed to fear the ground beneath them. A youth, golden as the sun, stepping toward the waiting water. His limbs moved without hesitation, effortless, each motion a hymn to the gods who had sculpted him. Strength and beauty woven into one, untouched, unaware. He did not see her. Not yet. But she had seen him. For too long, she had watched, the hunger inside her growing like ivy, curling, tightening, feeding on the space between them. It was not an easy desire. Not the longing poet spoke of in hushed verses, not the sweet ache of something that might someday be requited. This was something else. A hunger that did not know the taste of patience. She was waiting. The way a predator waits in the brush, breath held, muscles coiled, the line between restraint and surrender stretched to its breaking point. He reached the water's edge. He did not hesitate. The fabric of his tunic slipped from his shoulders, cascading down his back like a whispered farewell, discarded without thought. The weight of the sun clung to his skin, kissed every inch of him as he stepped forward, golden against the blue. The moment his foot broke the surface, the water shivered. It knew. And she moved. Her voice did not break the silence, it slithered through it, low, liquid, winding its way into the space between breaths. A greeting. A plea. A warning dressed as something softer. He turned, startled but not afraid. His eyes, wide with youth, searched hers, finding something he did not yet know the shape of. She smiled. And then she stepped forward. The air thickened. The trees bristled. Even the sun hesitated, its light filtering weakly through the leaves as if it did not wish to bear witness. He spoke, polite, distant, as though she were no more than a passing shadow. Her smile did not falter. Her hands, motionless at her sides, ached with the need to reach. The silence stretched. And then, he turned away. A single step. A moment of rejection so small, so effortless, it might have gone unnoticed had it not been the weight that tipped the scales. Something inside her cracked. She would not be ignored. The moment his body disappeared beneath the surface, she moved. No hesitation. No second thoughts. A sudden rush of limbs, of fingers desperate against skin, of water parting like a veil before sealing them both inside. He gasped. The first sound of struggle. But it was too late. Her arms were iron vines, her body a tide that would not be turned away. She held him, her breath a shudder against his throat, her heart a thunder against his chest. He fought. The water churned around them, spirals of silver and blue twisting with each frantic movement, each failed attempt to break free. His hands pushed, desperate, pleading against her grasp, but she did not yield. She would not yield. Not to time. Not to mercy. Not even to the gods. The air around them grew heavier, the water thickening with something unseen, something ancient, something listening. And then, she did the one thing no mortal should ever do. She called upon the divine. A voice raw with longing. A plea that should never have been spoken. And the gods, who had watched the world shape itself 1,000 times over, who had laughed at the folly of men and wept at their ruin, listened. The water convulsed. The sky shuddered. A cry ripped through the stillness, not his, not hers, but something new, something wrong, something that had no name. Bodies twisted. Flesh unraveled and rewrote itself. His form, no longer his alone. Hers, no longer separate. Two voices, breaking together, fusing into something neither of them had asked for. The water swallowed the echo. And the gods, satisfied with their cruel artistry, turned away. The water rippled where he had stood. The air still carried the shape of his breath. But he was already walking away. She did not move. Not yet. The absence of his gaze burned hotter than any rejection ever could. He had looked through her, past her, beyond her. As if she were nothing more than the rustling of leaves or the shifting of wind, a presence felt but never seen. Her fingers curled against her palms. She had been watching him long before he knew she existed. From the shadows, from the hush of the reeds, from the water itself, where she belonged but had never truly been at home. She had watched the way the sun adored him, the way it stretched its golden hands across his skin, greedy, possessive. She had watched the way the world yielded to him, soft beneath his feet, whispering its affections without words. She had thought, hoped, prayed to gods that never answered, that he might feel the pull the way she did. That he might turn, just once, and see her. He never had. And now he was leaving. The sound of his footsteps was unbearable. The slow, careless rhythm of someone untouched, unbothered, utterly free. Each step carried him further from her, each breath widened the space between them. A space she could not bear. She moved. Swift, silent, like the water that had birthed her. She reached for him before she had time to stop herself. A hand, trembling, outstretched. Not yet touching. Not yet daring. And then, contact. The lightest brush of fingers against his wrist. A barely there whisper of skin against skin. He froze. The moment stretched, too fragile, too thin. A heartbeat held between them, trembling on the edge of something irreversible. He turned. And when his eyes met hers, something inside her shattered. Not warmth. Not understanding. Nothing kind, nothing soft. Only confusion. Only distance. Only a question that did not need words to be understood. What do you want? Her mouth opened. No sound came. She had imagined 1,000 ways this moment would unfold. Had crafted it in dreams, woven it into the quiet of her lonely nights. But never like this. Never with his gaze cold as untouched stone. She forced herself to speak. A name, his name, soft, pleading. He did not answer. She had never known silence could cut so deeply. Her grip tightened, desperate, unwilling to let the moment slip away. He pulled back. No force. No violence. Just distance. Just rejection so effortless, so complete, it left her breathless. His hand was gone from hers, and with it, everything. He turned without another word. And this time, when he walked away, she felt the weight of finality pressing down on her chest, crushing, suffocating. She wanted to scream. To reach for him again. To make him see. But the gods had given her no weapons, only yearning. Only a hunger that had nowhere to go but inward, curling, festering, devouring. She watched him leave. She let him go. For now. The water closed over him like the jaws of a beast. Cold. Unforgiving. A silence that swallowed sound, swallowed air, swallowed everything but the raw, burning instinct to fight. Hermaphroditus thrashed. Limbs cutting through liquid silver, muscles burning, panic blooming in his chest. He had waded in freely, sinking into the cool relief of the spring, expecting nothing but stillness, but she was there, had been there all along, watching, waiting. Now she had him. Salmacis wrapped around him like the coils of a serpent, limbs slick and unrelenting, fingers pressing into his flesh as if she could mold him, shape him, claim him. He fought. She held. The water churned, turned violent, waves crashing against the edges of the spring as if the gods themselves recoiled at the sight. He gasped, but there was no air. He clawed, but there was no escape. Her breath, warm against his skin, her voice, trembling with something between plea and demand. Words spilled into the water, broken by the thrashing, by the struggle, by the sheer force of will colliding against will. You are mine now. No. The word never formed, lost in the rush of water filling his mouth, his throat. His body twisted, desperate, every muscle screaming for release, for distance, for freedom. But she held him tighter, her arms a cage, her hands a prayer that would not go unanswered. The spring closed in, pressing against him, through him, inside him. The water itself had hands, had weight, had purpose. A presence beyond Salmacis, beyond himself, something ancient, something watching. Then the pain began. It was not the pain of struggle. Not the sting of nails against skin, not the ache of exhaustion. No, this was something else. A force greater than them both, something old, something cruel, something inevitable. The water did not only take him. It changed him. A sensation unlike anything he had known before, a breaking and a mending all at once. Bone shifting, flesh yielding, something being stripped away while something else was forced into its place. It was not death, and yet it was the death of what had been. It was not birth, and yet it was the violent, agonizing creation of something new. His body, no longer his own. His form, no longer his alone. She gasped, her grip faltering for the first time, fingers splayed across his skin as if trying to comprehend what she had done, what they had become. And he could not speak. Could not think. Could not be. The water rippled, no longer violent, but ominous. A shudder passed through it, a final breath before settling into a silence heavier than before. The struggle had ended. And in its wake, nothing was as it had been. The air split with a soundless shudder. Not thunder. Not wind. Something deeper, older. A pulse of the divine, unseen but suffocating, tightening its grip around the world like a closing fist. Salmacis did not move. She knelt in the water, breathless, eyes wide with something between devotion and terror. Her arms clung to the body that was no longer just his, no longer just hers. It was both, and neither. A trembling creation, quivering between agony and ecstasy. She had prayed. And they had listened. The gods did not answer with words. There was no soft whisper from the heavens, no gentle caress of fate. They answered with force, with permanence, with something irreversible and cold. The kind of answer that does not grant mercy. The kind that is given not out of kindness, but amusement. The water shifted, no longer liquid, no longer bound by mortal laws. It slithered over skin like living hands, pressing, fusing, sealing. The ripples that should have faded lingered instead, twisting into unnatural patterns, circling the two figures entwined at the center of the spring. Salmacis' voice rose again, frantic, hungry, desperate. Make us one. A plea. A demand. A surrender. The gods did not hesitate. A force unseen yanked the breath from Hermaphroditus' lungs. His limbs seized, a cry stuck in his throat as the last remnants of his body, his self, fought against the change. But it was useless. This was beyond will. Beyond resistance. Bones cracked, but there was no breaking. Flesh stretched, but there was no tearing. The gods had no need for the limitations of mortals. Salmacis gasped, hands tightening around the shifting form beneath her fingers, feeling it shift, feeling it merge, feeling the answer to her prayer unfold like the blooming of some unnatural flower. She had asked. She had been given. But as her breath shuddered out of her, as her fingers dug into skin that was now both hers and not hers, she realized too late, she had never thought to ask what the price would be. Because something was slipping. Something was leaving her. Not just him. Not just his body folding into hers, his shape bending, his essence lacing itself into every fiber of her being. Something else. Something vital. Herself. She had wanted union. But the gods were cruel. They did not simply give. They took. And now there was no Salmacis. No Hermaphroditus. Only a new thing, an unfamiliar being, gasping, trembling, torn from what it had been and thrust into existence without choice. A thing forged not by love, but by divine whim, left to stare at its own reflection in the trembling waters and wonder, what am I now? The water held its breath. The trees, the sky, the very air seemed to hesitate, as if the world itself recoiled from what had just been forged in its midst. A body trembled at the surface of the spring, shuddering, gasping, its shape neither familiar nor entirely unknown. The ripples that licked against its skin carried no reflection. No single face remained. The silence did not last. A cry tore through the stillness, raw and shattering. Not a scream of pain, nor a voice seeking solace, this was something else. A sound that had no name, an eruption of horror, confusion, and something too vast, too unknowable to confine to mortal comprehension. The cry belonged to no single person. It was not his. Not hers. It was both, yet neither. The body in the water convulsed, limbs twisting in ways they should not, muscles seizing as if rejecting their own existence. Hands clawed at flesh that no longer felt like home, fingers scraping against skin too smooth, too foreign, too complete. And then, the realization struck. There was no separation. No distinction between what had been him and what had been her. There was only one. Something broke inside the being that had once been two. The mind recoiled, splintered, as echoes of two voices clashed within a single skull. Memories tangled like roots entwining in the dark, his childhood, her longing, his defiance, her hunger. A war waged within, neither side willing to submit, neither strong enough to stand alone. A sob racked the new form. But the sound was different now, layered, blurred, as if two throats wept from the same mouth. Hands pressed against a face that did not belong to one, against a body that defied definition. The soft curve of a chest, the sharp angles of a jaw, the delicate strength in limbs that hovered between masculine and feminine, rejecting both and embracing neither. Was this a blessing? Was this a curse? The gods had answered. But their answer was cruel in its precision. The nymph had begged for unity, for eternal fusion, for a love that no force could sever. But love was not what they had given. This was not a harmony of two souls intertwined in bliss. This was a collision. A force merging, neither willing, neither victorious. A hand, was it his, was it hers, touched the water. The surface trembled, hesitated, then reflected the new being's face. Wide eyes stared back, eyes that belonged to two, framed by features that could never be just one. The breath that left its lips was ragged, unsteady, foreign. What had they become? Something that should not exist. A body sculpted by divine hands, too seamless to be split apart, too bound to be whole. A soul stitched together with trembling fingers, forced to carry the weight of two lives in a single frame. Another sob. Another heartbeat. Another moment of suffocating realization. There was no going back. They had been reborn, but not in glory. Not in love. In the cold hands of the gods, they had been made into something new. And they would never be free again. The firelight flickered across the temple walls, throwing restless shadows that twisted and curled, never settling, never still. A whisper, low and shivering, slid through the chamber, a priestess uttering a name not meant for a single voice. It echoed, stretching beyond the stone, beyond the night, slipping into the cracks of the world where the forgotten god still listened. Outside, the wind howled. Or was it laughter? Between the pillars, a figure stood, their form bathed in the dim, golden glow. Not man. Not woman. Both. Neither. The air around them felt heavier, thicker, as if the weight of something unspeakable pressed against the fabric of the world itself. Eyes like stormlit ocean swept across the chamber, unreadable, unbound by the mortal chains of definition. The body before the flame was an enigma, a contradiction, broad shoulders softened by curves, sharp angles melting into something too fluid, too seamless to be named. The gods had always known. The boundaries men clung to, the fragile definitions they scrawled into the dirt to divide flesh into two rigid halves, such things were dust in the hands of eternity. The old stories, the ones whispered in fear and longing, spoke of figures who stood outside the chains of singular form. Dionysus, the god who danced on the edge of the known and the forbidden, draped in silk and madness, shifting between the call of the masculine and the sway of the feminine with a knowing smile. Tiresias, who had tasted life on both sides of the veil, his sight taken but his wisdom stretching beyond the reach of men. And then there were those who had been made new by the cruelty of fate. The ones who had not been given the choice. A body stolen by a god's curse, reshaped by vengeance, by lust, by prayers that should never have been answered. The stories wove themselves into the bones of the world, whispering through the ages, refusing to be forgotten. Yet, men had tried. They had clawed at the earth, at the temples, at the myths themselves, twisting them, breaking them, forcing them into smaller shapes, simpler shapes, shapes that fit neatly into their grasp. They feared what they could not name. They feared what would not be bound. But the old gods did not forget. And neither did those who stood at the edges, the ones who felt the pull of something nameless within their own skin. The ones who looked into the water and saw a reflection that did not belong to any single truth. The ones who knew, in the marrow of their existence, that they carried something ancient within them, something vast, something that could not be contained by the narrow definitions of mortal tongues. The fire burned lower. The figure before it did not move. They had existed before language tried to chain them. They would exist long after the last name was spoken. The gods had always known. And so had they. The water clings to him like a second skin. Cold, unrelenting, an unwanted touch he cannot shake. His breath is shallow, heart hammering in his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear. He should not be here. The air is thick with something unseen, something pressing, something hungry. The trees stand in silent witness, their twisted limbs unmoving, their roots drinking in the tension that shudders through the earth. Then, fingers. Slender, ghostly, wrapping around his wrists with a strength that should not belong to something so slight. The water stirs, shifts, closes in. A voice, soft and silken, coils around his ear, pressing against his mind like a whispered promise or a whispered threat. The difference is paper thin. He twists, but the whole tightens. No. It should not be like this. Desire should not be a trap. Passion should not come with shackles. Love should not have claws. Yet, here it is, blooming in the depths, blooming in the desperate clutch of hands that refuse to let go. Salmacis' breath is fevered against his throat. Her arms, no longer gentle, bind instead of embrace. Her touch demands instead of invites. The gods do not answer his silent plea. The wind does not carry his cry. The water does not wash away the violation of his skin. It is too late. The line has been crossed, the moment poisoned. No. No, no, no. The myth has been told in 1,000 ways, through lips that twist it into something romantic, something tender, something about longing and devotion. But the truth is here, sinking into the marrow of the moment, suffocating, cruel. This is not love. This is power, desperate and clawing, disguised in the shape of something sweeter. This is someone taking, without waiting for the answer. The story echoes through time, through centuries, through the ink of poets and the voices of scholars. It has been dressed in new names, in different faces, but the bones remain the same. It lives in the stolen breath of those who have been silenced, in the tremble of hands that could not push away fast enough. Consent was never given. Yet, even now, the tale is told with a smile. She wanted him too much to let him go, they say. She loved him too fiercely to be denied. She prayed to the gods for them to be one, so they granted her wish. But what was love to him? He was not given the chance to say. The words warp, shift, bleed into something else, something that strips him of his pain and leaves only the fantasy behind. A story made palatable for those who do not want to see the horror in its veins. And what of her? She, too, is bound by the weight of the telling. She, too, is chained to the pages that have reduced her to a villain or a victim, a monster or a maiden. Her desire, repainted as grotesque, unnatural, too much. Too much for a woman to feel, too much for a nymph to claim. She is devouring, insatiable, the embodiment of lust unchecked. But she is also desperate. Afraid. Yearning for something she believes she cannot have unless she seizes it with both hands. Was she not taught, too, that power and love were one and the same? That to take was the only way to keep? The gods are silent. The water stills. The story does not end. It never ends. The air is thick with change. It clings to the skin, electric, suffocating. Something is happening, something irreversible, something monstrous, something divine. A shudder rolls through the water, as if the very essence of the world is recoiling. The body that was once separate, once known, is no longer its own. Skin melts into skin, muscle fuses with muscle, limbs that once belonged to two twist into something new, something unrecognizable. The transformation is not gentle. It is not a gift. It is a war waged at the core of existence. This is not the first. It will not be the last. Metamorphosis is a language the gods speak fluently, a punishment, a mercy, a fate worse than death. It is the answer given when no answer will suffice. A body remade, a self rewritten, an identity ripped apart and stitched into something unfamiliar. One moment of weakness, of anger, of desire, one breath miscounted, one step taken too far, and everything changes. Arashen's fingers still twitch as they weave their cursed silk, her punishment stretching endlessly, eternally, through the threads of her sorrow. The gods took offense, and so they took her form. Not death, never death, only this suffering, this reminder of what she once was. Actaeon gasps his last breaths through the muzzle of a beast, the hunter becoming the hunted, his own hounds tearing into him before he can scream. The gods could have killed him outright. They didn't. They wanted him to feel it, to know what it meant to lose himself, to become something he was never meant to be. Niobe's grief is frozen in stone, her tears solidified into the weeping earth, a mother denied even the solace of death. She cannot move. She cannot forget. She is forced to exist within her own agony, held captive by it, owned by it. And now all this. Not beast. Not stone. Not thread bound in endless toil. This is something else entirely. This is the god's answer to a plea. A mockery of love, or perhaps a love so absolute it destroys. Two beings collapsing into one, neither winning, neither escaping. This is transformation as possession, as consumption. This is a curse wrapped in the soft illusion of unity. But is it so different from the rest? Change is never gentle. It is never kind. It rips and claws and devours. It does not ask permission. It does not grant reprieve. The body is a battlefield, and the gods watch, unmoved, as war is waged upon the flesh. It should be over. The pain should stop. The struggle should end. But it doesn't. Because the worst transformations are the ones that never settle. The ones that leave a mind screaming inside a body it no longer recognizes. The ones that force a soul to keep breathing when all it wants is silence. This is not rebirth. This is erasure. And it cannot be undone. The surface is a mirror, slick and waiting. A thin, glistening veil between one world and another, between flesh and something nameless. It shivers, pulses, calls. The water does not care who steps into it. It does not care if the body is willing. It only takes. A ripple forms, spreading outward, devouring reflection. The moment is too quiet, too still, as if something unseen is holding its breath. Then, a step. The first touch. The first surrender. Cold wraps around the skin like a whisper, like fingers curling in invitation. There is no resistance, only the slow, inevitable pull. The water does not push. It does not force. It seduces, it welcomes. It lulls. And then it consumes. The moment the body breaks the surface, everything changes. There is no up, no down, no past, no future, only motion, only sensation, only the liquid world pressing in from all sides. Sight is useless. Sound is swallowed whole. The body is weightless, formless, free, or trapped. This is where transformation begins. Water is not a place. It is a threshold. It does not belong to the land or the sky, nor to those who walk or those who fly. It is between, always between. It is a space where the rules do not hold, where a body can become something else, where a soul can slip free from its shape. It is dangerous. It is divine. To enter water is to surrender the self. to accept that what emerges may not be the same as what stepped in. Stories are built on this. The river that erases memory, the ocean that swallows whole, the sacred pool that cleanses not only flesh but fate. The gods watch from the edges, waiting, deciding. Sometimes they give a body back. Sometimes they do not. In this water, two bodies enter. Only one will remain. Skin presses against skin, limbs tangle, breath is stolen. Not by drowning, but by something worse, something more final. The struggle is silent, muffled by the weight of the water, lost in its endless, shifting embrace. There is no escape, only fusion. A cry bubbles up, unheard, unseen. Hands claw at the surface, but the surface does not exist. There is no way out. There is no way back. The water grips, twists, molds. It is not content to hold what it has taken. It reshapes. It remakes. It merges. Flesh warps. A chest that was once his, a form that was once hers, neither remains intact. The lines blur, identities tangle like strands of hair floating in the current, mixing, knotting, dissolving. This is not love. This is not unity. This is obliteration. The gods have answered. The water obeys. The self fractures, then reforms. And when the water finally stills, what remains is not the same. What remains is something new. Something unfinished. Something whole and broken all at once. But the water does not care. It has done what it was always meant to do. It has changed. It has taken. It has given. And now, it waits. It always waits. For the next. The body does not feel right. The breath that shudders from the lungs is too shallow, too alien. The fingers that press against the chest are wrong, longer than they should be, softer where there should be firmness. The heart pounds, hammering at ribs that do not belong. Something is missing. Something is too much. The body is whole, yet it is not. A scream rises, but never comes. The throat does not know how to shape it. The voice is neither his nor hers. It is both. It is neither. It is lost. The water shimmers around the flesh that is no longer familiar, its surface mocking with distorted reflections. Hermaphroditus stares, searching for the face that was once theirs, but the water lies. It twists the features, warps them into something new, something unrecognizable. The eyes are the same. The soul behind them is the same. But the skin, the form, the essence, stolen. Rewritten. A hand trembles, reaching for certainty, but there is none. The arms are foreign. The shoulders slope in a way they never did before. The hips curve, and yet they do not. Strength lingers, but it is softened. The body is his and hers, neither and both, whole and shattered all at once. The gods have spoken. A curse, a gift, it makes no difference. There is no undoing this. The water has claimed its price. Hermaphroditus clutches at the flesh that no longer belongs to them. Nails dig into skin, desperate to break through, to tear back to what once was. But the body does not yield. There is no going back. The self is tangled, twisted, forever merged with another. And then the grief comes. It is slow at first, creeping, curling in the belly like something rotten. Then it spreads. It claws up the throat, crushes the lungs, drowns the mind. The body shakes, trembles, rejects itself. But there is no escape. There is no release. The gods do not undo their work. They watch. They listen. They do not care. A shuddering breath. The chest rises, falls. Even that is unfamiliar. The loss is unbearable, but there is no name for it. Not death, not rebirth, something worse. Something cruel. A single tear drips onto the water's surface, and the reflection ripples, breaking apart. Just like the self. The water calls. It shimmers beneath the sun, silent, still, waiting. The surface is smooth as glass, untouched by wind or disturbance. It does not ripple. It does not breathe. It only waits. Men stand at the edge, gazing down, their reflection staring back with eyes they do not recognize. The stories whisper through the air, slipping between them like an unseen hand dragging its fingers along their spines. The spring is cursed. The water takes. The moment flesh meets the surface, something is lost. But it looks harmless. A man steps forward. He scoffs, strips away his tunic, and casts it aside. A dare hums between his ribs, pressing against his pride. Foolish superstitions. The gods do not meddle in such small things. He does not fear a pool of water. He steps in. It is warm, unnaturally so, a liquid embrace that does not soothe, but smothers. It clings to his skin as he wades deeper, wrapping around his legs, rising up his chest. It is not water. Not entirely. It has weight. It pulls. It presses against him like unseen hand smoothing over every inch of his body. He swallows hard. It is only water. But the moment he submerges, he feels it. Something shifts. It is slow at first, a strange sensation rolling through his limbs, a lightness where there should be strength. The muscles in his arms soften. His grip weakens. His breath catches. He tells himself it is nothing. A trick of the mind. The nerves playing games. But then his legs tremble. A foreign frailty creeps into his bones. His chest feels different, his lungs are too small, too fragile. A jolt of panic strikes. He moves to push himself up, to stand, to leave, but the water does not let go. It slides over him, a lover's whisper, a predator's grin. He gasps. His voice is wrong. No. No, it is only in his head. He drags himself to the shore, his hands shaking as they meet the earth. His arms barely hold his weight. The ground tilts. His heart slams against his ribs. He stares at his fingers, his wrists. The veins beneath his skin do not sit as they should. His flesh feels different, no, not different. Weaker. The water murmurs behind him. It is laughing. He staggers upright, but the strength is gone. His body does not move the way it once did. The others stare, their faces unreadable, their eyes heavy with something he does not want to name. He searches for mockery in their gazes, for cruelty, for smirks, anything to break this moment, anything to tell him it is all in his head. But there is nothing. Only silence. His own heartbeat is too loud. The stories were true. The water took something from him, something he cannot name, something he cannot reclaim. He is still himself. And yet he is not. The power in his limbs, the firm weight of his body, the sharpness in his stance, dulled, reshaped, softened. The spring watches, waiting for the next man to step forward. The stones are warm beneath his feet. The sun has scorched them for centuries, baking the land dry, but the spring remains. It is older than the ruins, older than the men who built them, older than the stories themselves. The water glows in the failing light, soft ripples moving like something alive beneath the surface. The air is thick with the scent of earth, of dust, of something faintly metallic. He kneels. The water does not speak. Not at first. The myths say it is cursed. They say men who touch it are changed, their strength stripped away, their forms reshaped by unseen hands. They say it takes without mercy. That it watches. That it waits. The thought curls around his spine, a whisper from centuries past. He dips his fingers in. Warm. Too warm. The sensation seeps into his skin, creeping up his veins like an infection. He exhales. The air is wrong, heavy, pressing against his lungs like a phantom weight. The stories are only stories. The gods are silent. The water cannot harm him. But he is not the first to think that. The records are there, buried in brittle parchment and fading ink. Travelers spoke of a strange lethargy after drinking from the spring, a peculiar weakness settling into their bones. The poet Ovid wove the tale into legend, his words dripping with something more potent than truth, fear. A spring that unmakes men. A water that does not cleanse, but corrupts. He cups his hands, watching the liquid pool in his palms. It is clear, harmless to the eye. But what of the mind? What of the body? He clenches his fists. A trick of suggestion. A story's power is its ability to twist reality, to turn shadows into ghosts, to turn a basin of water into something sinister. And yet, there are accounts. Not myths, not whispers, but words etched in stone, letters worn by time yet still legible. Romans believed the water held strange properties, something that softened the body, made warriors weak, made boys different. They avoided it. Feared it. Revered it. Not a curse. Not a blessing. Something in between. The wind shifts. The spring murmurs, a soft ripple, a shudder in the silence. Science would call it minerals, an imbalance in the earth, something natural, something explainable. But no amount of knowledge can erase the weight in his chest, the way the air tightens around his throat as he stares into the stillness. A man once stood where he stands now. And he left changed. The marble is cold, yet it breathes. Even after centuries, it refuses to die. The air in the gallery is still, suffocating in its silence, yet the figure on the pedestal is alive in a way no human can be. Muscles curve like rivers frozen in time. Flesh, impossibly soft in stone, glows beneath the museum's pale light. The face is serene, lips parted just enough to whisper something lost to history. The body, draped in shadow and illumination, defies expectation. Broad shoulders taper into slender hips, a contradiction sculpted with aching precision. Male. Female. Both. Neither. The weight of the gaze is unbearable. Some turn away in confusion, their minds grappling with the forbidden. Others linger, eyes tracing the smooth arch of a back that does not belong to any one shape of humanity. There is hesitation in the stance, an unspoken tension carved into the very essence of the figure. To look is to question, to wonder if desire should come with a warning. The Greeks did not fear beauty. They worshipped it. They captured it in bronze, let it seep into frescoes, burned it into pottery with strokes of black and red. Hermaphroditus stands among gods and warriors, yet remains apart. Where Apollo is the sun and Dionysus the wild revelry of night, Hermaphroditus exists in the in-between, an unspoken hymn that lingers in the silence between chords. There are vases, old as dust, where a young body reclines in water, limbs tangled in another's grasp. Salmacis is there, desperate, victorious, pleading. The story is written in curves of paint, in the way her fingers claw at the form she refuses to let slip away. But Hermaphroditus is drowning. Not in water, not in desire, but in something unseen. The moment before the change. The body still separate, the mind unaware of what waits beneath the surface. The artist knew. They press the brush harder, let the lines blur, let the chaos of movement speak in ways words never could. Then, the statues. They rest in temples, in private collections, in forgotten corners of museums where light barely reaches. At first glance, they are merely another body draped in marble, another perfect form crafted by hands that could mimic gods. But step closer. Look beyond the curve of the waist, past the delicate shape of the shoulders. The illusion shatters. A glimpse between the folds of a stone-carved sheet. A subtle betrayal of expectation. The shock is calculated, a trap waiting for the wandering eye. Those who sculpted did not seek to comfort. They did not care for the limits of human certainty. They carved the truth into permanence, let it rest in the hearts of those who dared to see. Some could not bear it. Statues hidden. Broken. Faces smashed with the force of rejection. Bodies dismembered, cast into ruin not by time, but by hands that refused to accept what they could not understand. The Greeks had honored the form. The Romans had admired it. Then came the fear. The shame. the heavy hand of those who needed the world to fit into something small, something controllable. Yet, Hermaphroditus remains. A fresco in Pompeii, half buried in volcanic ash, untouched by centuries of fire and decay. A delicate outline on an Athenian vase, waiting in the dark, untouched by the erosion of memory. The statues still breathe, still beckon, still demand to be seen. The body, shifting between definitions, does not vanish. It never will. The parchment crackles beneath a flickering flame, the ink whispering secrets from a world long buried. A hand, steady yet worn by time, drags a stylus across the surface, carving the myth into eternity. Ovid's pulse thrums beneath the words, a slow, relentless drumbeat that echoes through centuries. He does not hesitate. He does not soften the edges. The tale of Hermaphroditus spills forth, each line heavier than the last. The Romans feast on transformation, on bodies shifting like tides, on fates rewritten in a moment's breath. They consume change as if it were wine, savoring the sting, the intoxication of it. The Greeks had whispered of the water, of the moment where limbs entwined and became one. But the Romans, oh, the Romans let the ink bleed, let the horror seep into the cracks of their civilization. The boy stands at the edge of the spring, his reflection twisting in the ripples. Innocence. Ignorance. The final moments of self before the body ceases to belong to itself. The water calls, not in words, not in reason, but in something more ancient. He steps forward, and the ink on Ovid's page blackens like a storm swelling on the horizon. She is waiting. Salmacis is not a nymph of delicate size and trembling hands. She is hunger woven into flesh, desire turned to chains. The Romans understand her in a way the Greeks never dared. They know the weight of possession, the way power coils in the dark spaces between love and force. She does not ask, she takes. She does not beg, she binds. The ink pulses. Fingers grasp, nails sink into skin, and the struggle is not against flesh alone. It is against the gods, against fate itself. The water rises, wraps around the boy's body, drags him under. He is choking. He is becoming. There is no air, no breath, only the crushing weight of inevitability. Then, agony. Bones stretch and snap, muscles liquefy, form erases itself. The scream never reaches the surface. It is swallowed whole, lost in the depths where no god can hear. The Romans do not flinch. They let the pain writhe, let the horror remain, unsoftened by mercy. And then, silence. When the body resurfaces, it is not one, not two. The limbs are unfamiliar, the voice neither boy nor girl. Salmacis does not laugh, does not rejoice. She has won, but in her victory, she too has been undone. The water does not steal without leaving scars. Ovid's stylus pauses, the words weighing heavier than before. Hermaphroditus, the god who never asked to be divine. The Romans murmur their approval. They etch his name onto their walls, weave his form into their mosaics, cast him in bronze. Not as a hero, not as a tragedy, but as a warning. The spring remains, its curse lingering in the hearts of those who dare to approach. And still, the ink does not fade. The flame sputters in the cathedral's vast silence, casting jagged shadows along stone walls worn by whispered prayers and unspoken fears. The air is heavy with incense, thick enough to choke, thick enough to suffocate the remnants of what came before. Outside, the world shifts, pulses with the memory of a god neither man nor woman, a form that defied the laws of flesh. But here, within these walls, such things cannot be. The ink of scripture bleeds over ancient myths, smothering them beneath doctrine, twisting them into something lesser, something palatable. The name is not spoken. Not here. The candles flicker, their light an imitation of something divine, yet dim in the presence of what has been stolen. The altar stands, towering, unyielding. A new god reigns, and his law has no room for bodies that shift like the tides. The old myths are stripped, rewritten, buried beneath stone and sermon. Hermaphroditus fades, not erased, but swallowed, forced into silence, reshaped into something that does not threaten the fragile order of heaven and earth. A ripple of wind snakes through the narrow corridors, carrying the hushed breath of the past. The ink on forgotten scrolls pulses beneath layers of dust. The statues remain, hidden in vaults, locked away where the faithful cannot see them. But stone does not forget. The chisel's touch lingers, the curves of a body both masculine and feminine still carved with aching precision. The Romans did not fear this form. They worshipped it, adorned it with laurel and gold. But the New World has no use for such divinity. Footsteps echo. A priest stands before an ancient relief, torchlight licking against the marble, a form both familiar and forbidden. Lips pressed together in quiet contemplation, then twist in quiet revulsion. A decision is made. The hammer is heavy in his grasp, its weight a promise, a condemnation. The first strike shatters the curve of a hip. The second, the swell of a chest. The third, the face, divinity reduced to dust. The echoes linger, vibrating through the bones of the earth. And still, the myth does not die. It clings to the edges of scripture, slipping through cracks in doctrine. The old stories twist, are made into cautionary tales, into warnings of corruption, of unnatural desires. Androgyny becomes an omen, an aberration. The body that was once worshipped is now cursed, cast out, condemned to shadows. The ink changes. Manuscripts are rewritten, stripped of their ambiguity. The duality that once thrived in gods and heroes is made monstrous, sinful. The words tighten around throats, press against ribs like iron bars. But myths are not meant to be tamed. They bleed through the cracks of time, seeping into the spaces between scripture and song. They cling to the tongues of poets who dare to whisper what has been forbidden. They flicker in the forbidden texts locked away in monastery vaults, waiting, waiting, waiting. Outside, the wind stirs again, curling through the streets like a phantom. It does not forget. It will never forget. The candle burns low, wax bleeding down its spine in molten rivulets, pooling like congealed time against the wooden desk. A hand, trembling yet precise, traces the faded ink of an ancient manuscript, its letters curling like whispers from the dead. The scholar leans closer, breath shallow, heart pounding in his ears. It is there, buried beneath the weight of forgotten centuries, beneath dogma and fire, beneath the silence imposed by trembling priests and condemning tongues. The myth has survived. A page turns, brittle as autumn leaves, edges flaking away into dust. A name stirs between the lines, smothered by time yet refusing to die. Hermaphroditus. The ink is old, but its defiance is fresh. The scholar exhales, fingers tightening. Outside, the city hums, oblivious to the pulse of something ancient reawakening in the glow of candlelight. Elsewhere, a chisel meets marble. The first strike is cautious, reverent. The second, bolder, muscles tensing, breath steadying. The sculptor's hands move like a conjurer's, coaxing flesh from stone, summoning limbs, curves, the impossible symmetry of a body neither holy man nor holy woman. Dust curls in the air, a fine mist of centuries collapsing into the present. He steps back, chest heaving, and sees it take form once more. Eyes closed, lips parted, the figure seems on the verge of breath, as if the soul trapped within might stir and reclaim its voice. The Renaissance is a resurrection, but not all things return unscathed. The old gods are still forbidden, yet their echoes haunt the canvas, the page, the chisel's edge. The poets dare to whisper their names, slipping them between lines of allegory and metaphor. The painters, their hands guided by something they do not name, let the body tell the story instead. A shoulder softened beyond masculine rigidity. Hips curved just enough to unsettle. A glance from an androgynous form that lingers too long in the mind. They bring Hermaphroditus back in fragments, in suggestion, in defiance wrapped in beauty. A patron stands before a painting, hands clasped behind his back. His lips pressed together, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. He knows what he sees, though the artist has hidden it beneath the language of divinity, beneath a shroud of classical revival. The church watches. The Inquisition listens. But art cannot be burned as easily as books. It cannot be exorcised from the stone once it has been carved. It lingers in the halls of nobility, in the palaces of power, and no decree can silence what the eye has already beheld. In a dim chamber, a poet dips his quill into ink, hand steady, pulse unrelenting. He writes not with permission, but with necessity. The words spill, raw and unrepentant. He does not know if they will survive, if the paper will be burned, if his name will be buried with the condemned. But the myth has waited long enough. The ink darkens the page, staining history with the truth it tried to silence. Outside, the world moves forward. But the past is awake now, and it will not be forgotten. The curtain quivers as if alive, its velvet folds trembling under the weight of something unseen. The air is thick with anticipation, the kind that hums against the skin, that makes the breath falter in the throat. A single note pierces the silence, a lone violin, its bow dragging across the strings like a whisper through the dark. The melody twists, hesitates, then swells, spilling over the waiting hush like blood from an open wound. Then, light. A figure steps forward, half in shadow, half illuminated by the cruel glow of the stage. The face is smooth, ageless, shifting in the flicker of the lamps. The body, neither holy man nor holy woman, holds a poise too deliberate, too perfect, unsettling in its very balance. The audience does not blink. They cannot. The theater holds its breath. The story is ancient, but here, tonight, it lives again. Hermaphroditus, spoken of in hushed tones, erased, silenced, now sings. And the voice, oh, the voice! It is not one, but two, laced together in an eerie harmony, soaring to impossible heights only to plunge into aching depths. A soprano that shatters like glass, a baritone that rumbles like distant thunder. It is unnatural, unholy, divine. The sound crawls beneath the skin, coils around the ribs, tightens like a phantom hand at the throat. Some in the audience shift uncomfortably, their gloved hands clenching in their laps. Others lean forward, mesmerized, lips parted, hearts hammering. It is beauty. It is horror. It is everything that should not exist, and yet here it stands before them, breathing, weeping, singing. The stage is a dreamscape, shifting between worlds, columns crumble and reform, water shimmers where there was once stone. Figures move in the periphery, priests in robes that rustle like dried leaves, lovers frozen mid-embrace, tormentors with knives glinting at their sides. The opera swells, the orchestra writhing beneath the singer's voice, the music climbing higher, higher, until it is unbearable. The figure reaches out, trembling, longing, and something unseen takes hold. The body convulses. The voice splinters. The transformation begins. A gasp ripples through the crowd, sharp and involuntary. The actor's limbs seize, shifting under invisible hands. The waist narrows, the chest softens, the jawline dissolves into something unfamiliar. The audience cannot look away, cannot blink. Muscles twist, flesh yields, a body once whole becomes something else entirely. It is painful. It is exquisite. And then, silence. The music has stopped. The stage is empty but for the figure, collapsed upon the floor, gasping, shaking. The audience waits, not daring to breathe. The figure stirs. Slowly, impossibly, it rises. And when it lifts its head, there are no words left to speak. Only the stare, hollow, knowing, eternal. A scream. Not from the stage. From the audience. A woman faints, her fan clattering against the floor. A man mutters a prayer under his breath. The theater is no longer a place of art, it has become something else, something ancient, something forbidden. The legend has not just been told. It has been summoned. The final note rings out. Soft. Haunting. And then, the curtain falls. For a moment, no one moves. The weight of it lingers, a phantom hand pressing against every chest, a shudder rippling through every spine. Then, slowly, someone stands. A clap, hesitant at first, then another, then another. And suddenly, it is an uproar. Applause crashes like waves against the theater walls. Cheers. Gasps. Weeping. The myth has returned, and no one will leave unchanged. The actor bows, lips curving into a knowing smile. The story is not over. It never was. The book trembles in the reader's hands. The inked letters slither beneath their gaze, shifting, coiling, whispering something they were never meant to hear. A candle flickers beside them, the flame bending as if recoiling from the weight of the words. Outside, the world is silent, but inside these pages, something stirs. It has always been here. Waiting. Watching. And now, it breathes. The myth does not simply appear in the novels of the 19th and 20th centuries, it festers in them. It lurks between lines of poetry, twists itself into Gothic nightmares, clings to the fragile edges of fragile minds. It does not shout its name, it does not need to. It seeps in, unnoticed at first, until it is everywhere, until it is all that remains. A lone scholar sits beneath the sickly glow of a gas lamp, pen scratching against paper, hands unsteady. Their thoughts are not entirely their own anymore. Something ancient has slipped between their ribs, something nameless yet familiar. They write feverishly, their ink-stained fingers trembling. The words pour forth, relentless, unstoppable. A tale of a body that shifts under the weight of something divine and monstrous. A transformation that is neither a gift nor a curse, but something far worse, something unknowable. The ink bleeds through the parchment. The candle sputters. They do not stop writing. Elsewhere, a poet stands before the window, watching the mist coil through the streets, waiting for something, someone, that will never come. Their reflection stares back, but the face is blurred, indistinct. Is this how Hermaphroditus felt? Suspended between forms, trapped in the cruel embrace of an indifferent world? The poet presses their forehead against the cold glass. The city below moves on without them, unaware of the storm unraveling in their bones. They will write of longing tonight. They will write of a body forever caught between two ghosts. The pages turn. The myths contort. Writers dare to speak of things once hidden. They do not name it as the ancients did, but it lingers in their stories like a phantom, refusing to be exorcised. In the grotesque worlds of the decadence, the myth is stitched into the flesh of androgynous beauties, their skin pale as marble, their eyes heavy with sorrow. In the suffocating tales of the Victorians, it is something feared, something repressed, something that flickers only in nightmares before being banished at dawn. And then, modernity arrives, sharp-edged and cruel. The myth does not vanish, but it changes. It no longer lingers in hushed corners. It stands in the light, unashamed, unrelenting. The 20th century bleeds it onto the page with the ferocity of a wound ripped open. The body is dissected, examined, questioned. What are we, really? What lines divide us? What happens when they are erased? The words press heavier now, weighted with something more than legend. A novelist paces their apartment, cigarette smoke curling around them like a noose. Their typewriter waits, silent, demanding. They know what they must write, but the thought terrifies them. A story of a person who becomes something else. A metamorphosis that is neither punishment nor reward but inevitability. They hesitate, fingers twitching over the keys. And then, with a breath that shakes their very soul, they begin. The myth does not die. It never has. It shifts, molds itself to the fears and desires of each passing age, slipping through the cracks of literature like water through clenched fists. Some reject it, some worship it, some cannot bear to look at it at all. But it is always there, waiting to be read, waiting to be remembered. The room is dark, save for the flickering glow of a single lamp. The analyst sits in silence, hands folded, eyes heavy with knowing. Across from them, the patient shifts, restless, drowning in the weight of words not yet spoken. A pause lingers, thick, suffocating, like a hand closing around a throat. Then, a whisper, barely audible. A confession. A dream. A body that is both theirs and not. A reflection that shifts, shimmers, refuses to hold its shape. A merging. A loss. A horror so intimate it feels like desire. The analyst does not blink. They have heard this before. Hermaphroditus, they murmur, and the word slithers into the air like a serpent, ancient and waiting. The myth uncoils before them, stretching through time, wrapping itself around Freud's theories like ivy around a crumbling statue. A boy, a girl, a body forced into one, stripped of boundaries, thrust into the unknown. The myth pulses with something primal, an echo of the fears buried beneath consciousness, the unspeakable truths that slip through cracks in the mind. The patient grips the arms of the chair. Their breath is uneven. The analyst leans forward. They speak of the unconscious, of the war that rages beneath the skin. Masculine, feminine, colliding like tectonic plates. The ID, ravenous and wild, gnashing its teeth at the gates of restraint. The ego, trembling, struggling to maintain control. The superego, a whisper of shame, curling through every thought like smoke. And at the heart of it all, desire. A hunger that does not belong to one form, one name, one self. A need that devours definition, leaving nothing but the raw, trembling truth beneath. The patient shivers. They think of childhood. The strange, fragmented memories that never made sense. The way the mirror never quite matched the way they felt. The way the world demanded a choice, but their body, their mind, refused to make one. They speak in fractured sentences, stumbling over words that refuse to come out clean. The analyst listens. They have read this before, between Freud's pages, in the ink-stained nightmares of case studies long buried. The myth lives in all of them, in all of us, this ancient, quivering thing that cannot be confined, cannot be dissected without something vital bleeding out. It lurks beneath the surface of every dream, twisting itself into symbols, hiding in the dark corridors of thought. It is the fear of dissolution. The fear of becoming something unrecognizable. The fear of losing control. The analyst speaks of repression. Of the way society carves us into shapes that do not fit. The way we break ourselves to comply. They speak of dreams where bodies change, where lines blur, where nothing is certain except the overwhelming terror of being seen. And yet, beneath the fear, there is something else. Something seductive. Something that pulls, that lingers, that refuses to be erased. The patient swallows hard. They have felt this. They have always felt this. And now, the myth stirs again, its voice threading through the air, calling to them like a song half remembered from another life. The reflection shifts. Not a trick of the light, not a flaw in the glass, something else. Something watching back. The hands on the sink are familiar, but the face, holds a question that cannot be answered. It is neither wrong nor right, neither comfort nor horror. It is something in between, something nameless, something whispered in the dead of night by those who fear it most. A heartbeat. A second. A breath. Hermaphroditus stands in the silence, not in the mirror but in the mind, the body, the space between history and self. A name spoken in fear and longing, in awe and revulsion. A body that defied the laws of the world, stitched together by a moment of violent surrender. A myth that refuses to stay buried. The myths are always about control. The gods play their games, shaping flesh to fit their whims, and mortals are left to suffer the consequences. Hermaphroditus did not choose. There was no consent, no request, no prayer uttered in the hope of becoming something more. There was only water, only hands that clutched too tightly, a force too strong to resist. And when it was over, when the struggle had ceased, when the cries had faded into the ripples of an indifferent pool, the world had one less boy, one less girl, and something new in their place. That is what they fear. The ones who write the laws, the ones who carve statues from rigid stone, the ones who need the world to remain simple, divided, defined. They cling to the old stories, twisting them into lessons, warnings, threats. A body that is both must be a punishment. A body that refuses to conform must be unnatural. A body that cannot be claimed by one side or the other must be erased. But myths are not cages. They are echoes, reverberating through time, refusing to be silenced. Hermaphroditus lives in the breath of those who have stood in front of the mirror and seen something neither and both. In the quiet terror of the question, what am I? In the defiant answer, I am. In the hands that tremble over fabric, over razors, over pills, over the unrelenting need to make the outside match the inside, or to stop needing at all. In the battle between body and mind, in the war waged over pronouns and paperwork, in the eyes that scan every room wondering if today will be the day someone sees them as a threat. A body that is both is a body that is free. And nothing terrifies them more than freedom. The water is still. Too still. The kind of stillness that doesn't belong to something alive, something breathing. It is the silence before a whisper, the hush before a scream. The kind of silence that watches. And she is watching. Salmacis stands by the pool, her body a sculpture of curves and softness, her eyes dark with something unspoken. She waits. She has all the time in the world. The boy doesn't see her at first. He sees the water, clear and inviting, the way it shimmers like a lover's touch. He strips away his clothes without hesitation, his skin glowing golden in the afternoon light. He believes he is alone. That belief will be his undoing. She steps forward, and the world shifts. Her presence is a slow poison, sinking into the air, thickening it, making it too much. The moment is delicate, trembling, on the edge of something inevitable. She speaks, her voice is honey, warmth, promise. But there is something beneath it, something that slithers through the sweetness, something sharp enough to draw blood. He turns, startled, and she smiles. A smile of invitation. A smile of possession. A smile that says, I will have you. She moves closer, hands outstretched, fingers reaching, and he recoils. He does not want her. He is too young, too innocent, too sure of himself. He does not yet understand the nature of hunger, of the things that lurk beneath the surface, waiting for a moment of weakness. But she does. Salmacis does not wait to be wanted. She takes. The struggle is brief, a flicker of resistance crushed beneath the weight of inevitability. She clings to him, presses her body against his, whispers words that wrap around his throat like silk and steel. He fights, but the water closes in, swallowing his screams. There is no escape. There never was. When it is over, the boy is gone. Something else rises in his place, something that is neither him nor her, something reshaped by desire, by force, by the will of a woman who refused to be denied. And history takes note. The femme fatale is born in the echo of Salmacis's laughter. She slinks through the pages of time, her silhouette shifting, changing, adapting. Lilith, laughing in the dark. Circe, turning men into beasts. The sirens, calling from the rocks, their voices dripping with promise and doom. She is always there, watching, waiting, weaving her web. Men fear her. They always have. She is too powerful, too knowing, too dangerous. She does not beg. She does not weep. She wants, and she takes, and the world bends beneath her touch. They write her as a warning. A lesson. A monster cloaked in beauty. They give her red lips and venomous tongues, lace and daggers, a smile that means ruin. They make her seductive and wicked, a force of nature wrapped in silk. But beneath it all, beneath the whispers and the legends, the fear and the fascination, there is Salmacis. Waiting. Watching. Smiling. The candle flickers, the flame bending as if whispering to something unseen. The room is silent, but not empty. Shadows shift against the walls, listening, waiting. A page turns. The ink is old, the words press deep into the paper, as if the writer carved them there with shaking hands. The myth hums beneath the surface, restless, alive, aching to be heard. A name. Hermaphroditus. The letters coil like a secret never meant to be spoken aloud. The air thickens. The weight of centuries presses against trembling fingertips. Someone, somewhere, is reading, searching, needing. For something that feels real. For something that feels like them. The story moves like water, slipping through grasping hands. A boy, untouched by desire. A woman, hungry, relentless. A struggle? A union? A curse? Or was it? There is something here. Something hidden in the spaces between the words, something buried beneath the fear, beneath the need to name things, to control them. A truth, gasping for breath, for recognition. A truth that does not fit in neat lines. And outside the pages, outside the myths and the ancient words, there is a heartbeat. A pulse of something that refuses to be erased. A body standing in the mirror, searching for answers in the curve of a hip, in the line of a jaw. The questions burn, raw and silent. What am I? Who am I? The reflection stares back, waiting. Hermaphroditus breathes in the margins of history, waiting too. The myth was never just about one thing. Never just a warning, never just a tragedy. It was survival. It was a name given to something that refused to be nameless. A body that did not fit, a story that could not be rewritten, no matter how many times they tried to turn it into something else. And they tried. They tried to twist it into shame, into punishment, into something monstrous. They tried to burn it away, to lock it in silence, to make it not exist. But the fire did not consume it. The ink did not fade. The story did not vanish. It became something more. It slipped through the cracks of time, seeping into poetry, into whispered words passed in secret, into hands that reached for each other in the dark. It found the ones who needed it most, the outcasts, the broken, the fearless, the ones who would not be erased. And now, it stands at the edge of history, unbowed, unbroken. No longer a whisper. A roar. The canvas is massive, stretching beyond the edges of sight, swallowing the air, commanding attention. A single stroke of color carves through the void, bold, raw, merciless. The paint drips like blood, slow and deliberate, thick with something unspeakable. A figure emerges. Not man. Not woman. Something in between. Something beyond. I stare from the depths of pigment, their gaze neither pleading nor yielding. They are watching, waiting, judging. They know. They have always known. The myth moves beneath the brushstrokes, restless. Hermaphroditus, torn, twisted, worshipped, forgotten. Their body is a battlefield, a place where identity shatters and reforms, where desire and fear bleed into one. The artist's hands tremble, tracing the story into existence, birthing something ancient into something now. In another space, colder, sharper, a sculpture stands. Stone meets flesh in an eerie contradiction, a body caught mid-transformation. Marble veins pulse beneath the surface, alive in a way that should not be possible. The lips are parted as if gasping, the torso arching, muscles straining, reaching, toward what? The answer is just beyond comprehension, hanging in the stillness of the gallery, in the breathless silence of those who dare to look too closely. Someone does. A spectator, frozen before the form, drawn in by something they cannot name. The air shifts. They recognize it, not in their mind, but in their bones, in the space between their ribs where something unsaid has always lived. A shiver crawls up their spine. The sculpture does not move. But it sees them. It always has. Elsewhere, neon blazes against the dark. Fluorescent words flicker, electric veins humming against a backdrop of nothingness. The letters twist, melt, reform, stuttering in their own language, half-lost phrases, stolen poetry, the remnants of myths half-remembered and half-destroyed. They do not stay still. They do not obey. Just like the story. Just like Hermaphroditus. The myth refuses to die. It rises, reborn in paint, in stone, in light. It is torn from the past and thrust into the present, stretched across gallery walls, shattered into digital fragments, carved into the skin of the world itself. The artists know what they are doing. They are resurrecting something that was never meant to be buried. And it breathes. The fire crackles low, tongues of gold licking at the darkness. Shadows waver across the faces gathered close, ancient words curling into the night like smoke. A story is being told, no, summoned. It is not merely spoken, it emerges, raw and shifting, slipping between tongues and centuries, carried by breath and blood. The first voice speaks of Ardhanarishvara, half-man, half-woman, a deity who is both and neither, a body split down the center yet whole, perfect, divine. The flickering fire catches the glint of an eye, unreadable, unknowable. Somewhere, a wind stirs. Somewhere, a boundary trembles. Another voice picks up the thread. The north whispers of Loki, the shapeshifter, the trickster, the mother of a beast, the father of chaos. Boundaries mean nothing, names are mere suggestions. One moment, a god, the next, a goddess, always something more than flesh and bone. Laughter ripples through the night, but beneath it, something colder. Loki's name is spoken like a knife's edge, half in reverence, half in warning. The silence between the stories is not empty. It is heavy. Waiting. Then, a murmur from the west. The two spirit people of the First Nation step forward, not confined, not caged. They move between worlds, honored, sacred, seen. Their existence is not questioned. It is known. It is written in earth and sky, in the language of the wind, in the weight of a gaze that does not need words. A pause. A heartbeat. The fire shifts, embers cracking like ancient bones. Africa speaks next. The Orisha merge and shift, Obatala, both mother and father, Mawulisa, twin halves of creation entwined. There is no shame in fluidity, no fear in transformation. The gods move as they will, and the world moves with them. The voices circle, weaving threads across oceans, across empires, across the ruins of what was and the wreckage of what remains. The stories are mirrors, distorted and brilliant, bending light and time. Hermaphroditus is not alone. They never were. Somewhere, a whisper, then why do we pretend they are? The fire is burning low, but the stories will never go out. They shift, they breathe, they change. The screen flickers, the glow seeping into the dark. A figure moves, slow, deliberate, something just off-kilter enough to set the nerves on edge. The music swells, a sharp note like a blade dragged across skin. The audience leans forward, breath held, waiting for the inevitable shift. The reveal. The transformation. It happens in an instant. A whisper of light, a body caught in transition, not one thing, not the other, something more, something other. The myth breathes beneath the celluloid, stitched into every flickering frame. A reflection in the water. A silhouette half dissolved in shadow. Hermaphroditus is not a name here, they are a presence, watching, waiting. In books, the words curl around them, shaping, reshaping. One writer paints them as tragic, a soul caught between, doomed to never belong. Another turns them into something divine, untouchable, a being of light too brilliant to define. Another makes them a monster, something to be feared, to be hunted. The ink spills in contradictions. They are a dream and a nightmare, a prophecy and a curse. Somewhere, a voice speaks their name. A director calls for another take. A script is rewritten, then rewritten again, a nervous hand crossing out what was too much, too real. A publisher hesitates before sending the manuscript to print. A critic writes a review, their words careful, measured, avoiding saying too much, or anything at all. Still, the myth refuses to be buried. It moves through pop culture like a ghost, silent, omnipresent, undeniable. A lyric in a song that lingers too long in the mind. A half-glimpsed character on a TV show, their story unfinished, unresolved. A subplot in a movie, erased in the final edit but still felt, haunting the spaces between what is said and what is meant. Hermaphroditus remains. In whispers. In echoes. In the spaces where the world isn't watching. The water is still. A glassy, silver surface, unbroken, waiting. It knows. It remembers. It holds the past beneath its calm, rippling only when the wind whispers the name. The name that refuses to die. The name that lingers, restless, in the mouths of those who try to speak it but never quite understand. Hermaphroditus. Salmacis. Two bodies, one body. Two souls, tangled, fighting, merging, becoming. Somewhere, someone runs their fingers over the pages of an old text, tracing the myth with the soft pressure of their touch. A sculptor drags a chisel across stone, striking out lines, shaping a body that defies the rules written in flesh. A painter hesitates, brush hovering over the canvas, knowing that with one stroke, they will create something that cannot be unnamed. They all feel it, that pull, that ache, the story that never fades. Because it still haunts us. Because it still sings, just beneath the surface. Salmacis was never supposed to be remembered. A nymph too weak, too soft, too desperate. She clung, she begged, she took what was not hers. Or so they say. But history is cruel, and myths are written by those who wish to control them. The truth is something wilder, something that refuses to be tamed. She was not weak. She was hunger, she was desire, she was the thing that could not be denied. When she spoke, the gods listened. When she touched, the world changed. They cursed her for it. They rewrote her into something lesser, something shameful. But the myth does not end. It never ends. It waits in the water. It waits in the bones of statues, in the lines of poetry, in the silent glances of those who recognize themselves in the story. It waits in the hearts of those who have felt that same pull, the longing, the rage, the fear of being something that others cannot name. And still, the name is spoken. Still, the myth refuses to fade. Because it is more than a story. It is a warning. A promise. A truth too powerful to drown. The ink is still wet. Somewhere, a writer presses their pen to paper, rewriting the myth with trembling hands. A scholar rips open an old text, dissecting every word, exposing the veins that pulse beneath its ancient skin. A filmmaker watches their actor stand before the camera, half-lit, something unnameable flickering in their expression. The myth shifts again. It refuses to stay still. Voices that were silent now rise like a tide, drowning out centuries of erasure. They take the old bones of the story and smap them, rearrange them, reshape them into something that can finally breathe. No longer just a tale of loss. No longer a tragedy. No longer a curse. The myth does not belong to the past, it is a living thing, twisting in the hands of those who refuse to be erased. Hermaphroditus is not a victim. Salmacis is not a villain. The water was never meant to be their tomb. A sculptor chips away at marble, carving curves where there should have been edges, blurring the lines where others demanded separation. They carve the body as it is felt, not as it is dictated. They refuse to listen to the old rules. The old rules were written in blood. A poet whispers their name into the darkness, setting it free from the weight of shame. They let the syllables slip from their tongue like a prayer, like a defiance. Hermaphroditus. Salmacis. They write them not as warnings, but as possibilities. The myth breathes. It expands, contracts, shifts. It does not end. It is in the quiet gasps of those who see themselves in it for the first time. It is in the fire of those who refuse to let it be stolen from them again. It is in the hands of those who write, who paint, who speak, who refuse to be erased. The gods never controlled the story. The people do. And the people are speaking.